A driverless car careens into traffic. A half-mowed lawn sits abandoned, and on the sidewalk, a pile of empty clothes drops to the pavement. For millions of Christians, the Rapture has moved beyond best-selling thrillers to become a bedrock certainty, an article of faith reinforced since childhood. But if you travel back through history and ask believers in the 16th century, or the 10th century, or the 2nd century about this imminent escape plan, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. For the first 1800 years of Christianity, this concept simply did not exist. So if the Rapture is a relatively modern invention, how did an entire culture become utterly convinced it is clearly written in the Bible? To find the answer, we have to look at the scriptures used to support it. The most famous is in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, where Jesus describes two people working in a field. One is taken and one is left. The popular assumption is that the person who is taken is the faithful believer, suddenly plucked from the earth and beamed up to heaven. Look at the preceding sentence. Jesus compares this event to the days of Noah, when floodwaters swept people away. Who was taken? Not the righteous. The wicked were removed in sudden judgment. Noah's family was left behind, safely preserved to inherit the earth. If there is any ambiguity, a parallel passage in Luke 17 clears it up. When the disciples ask Jesus exactly where these people are taken, he replies, "Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather." That is a pretty clear reference to death, not a celestial paradise. Reading the text in its original context flips the modern narrative upside down. You do not want to be taken. Being left behind is actually the goal. The second major pillar of rapture theology comes from a letter by the Apostle Paul, 1 Thessalonians 4. It describes believers being caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord. For decades, readers have seen an upward trajectory in that phrase, an evacuation off the earth and into the sky for a permanent escape. But Paul was writing to a first-century audience, using language they understood. The Greek word he uses for meet is apontesis, a specific civic term. When a visiting king approached a city, prominent citizens wouldn't wait inside. They went out to meet him on the road, formally welcomed him, and immediately turned around to escort him back into their city in a massive triumphant procession. Paul also carefully chose his word for air here. He used air, which specifically refers to the lower, breathable atmosphere just above the ground. If he meant the distant starry heavens, he would have used a different Greek word, aranos. He wasn't describing an exit strategy. He was describing a welcoming party, citizens going out to greet a returning king, only to bring him down to rule his earthly domain. So if an earthly evacuation isn't in Matthew, and it isn't in Thessalonians, where did this idea come from? We have to fast forward to the 1830s, to a British preacher named John Nelson Darby. He developed a highly structured theology known as dispensationalism, which featured a novel concept, a secret two-stage return of Jesus that included a pre-tribulation rapture. That idea exploded in America through a single wildly successful 1909 book, the Scofield Reference Bible. Scofield embedded Darby's teachings directly into Scripture as footnotes. Seeing ancient biblical text and 19th century commentary side by side, millions allowed the two to bleed together into one authoritative voice. From there, the doctrine bypassed formal theological institutions entirely. It spread rapidly through tent revivals, populist prophecy conferences, and newly formed Bible institutes. The rapture we know today is a viral 19th century footnote that successfully overwrote ancient historical context. Stripping away this doctrine doesn't destroy biblical hope. Actually, it cures a massive toxic flaw that has infected modern faith: escapism. If you believe the world is a sinking ship and your rescue helicopter is arriving at any second, your priorities shift. Why fight social injustice? Why cure human disease? Or protect the environment, if the planet is destined for the incinerator anyway? That defeatist attitude contradicts the Bible's narrative arc. It doesn't move from a good creation to a sudden evacuation. The trajectory moves from creation to renewed creation. The divine plan was never to abandon the physical world, but to ultimately merge heaven and earth together, permanently. We don't need to look for an escape hatch in the clouds. The real challenge is keeping our feet firmly planted on the ground, rolling up our sleeves, and participating in the active healing and renewal of the world right here and right now.